Good afternoon. I'd like to call the October 23rd, 2023 Housing Authority regular meeting to order. Members of the public may view and listen to the meeting as noted on the city's website and as noted on the agenda. As a matter of housekeeping, I'd like to remind commissioners to keep their microphones muted unless they are speaking. The City of Santa Rosa is committed to us creating a safe and inclusive environment free from disruption. We will not tolerate any hateful speech or actions and are well staffed to monitor that everyone is participating respectfully or they will be removed. If necessary, we'll also immediately end the meeting. Clerk, please explain how public comments will be heard at today's meeting.
At each agenda item, after the item is presented, the chair will ask for Housing Authority Commissioner comments. After the commissioner comments, the chair will open the item for public comment. For members of the public attending in person, when the chair calls for public comments after an item is presented, please go to the closest public speaking podium in the upper tier of chambers. Once situated at the podium, the clerk will unmute your microphone and permit your comment to be heard. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per speaker per item. Public comments are limited to 1 comment per speaker per item. Additionally, there is 1 public comment period on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda matters. That would be item 5. This is a time when any person may address the Housing Authority on matters not listed on this agenda, but which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Housing Authority.
Thank you. Before I ask the clerk to do a roll call for attendance to assist with streaming the meeting and capturing commissioners as they are speaking, I want to remind commissioners to please ask the chair to be recognized before asking a question or making a comment. This will allow time for the cameras to shift to a new speaker. Please ask, I'm asking the clerk for a roll call, please.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do a roll call for attendance. We will start with Commissioner Smith.
Here.
Commissioner Newton.
Here.
Commissioner Conte.
Here.
Let's see, Commissioner Friedman will be absent. Commissioner Downey is currently absent. And Vice Chair LaPena also absent. And then Chair Owen.
Here.
Okay, let the record reflect that all commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioners Friedman, Downey, and Vice Chair LaPena.
Thank you. I'd like to move to item 3, which is statement of abstention. Are any commissioners, if there are any statements of abstention in today's meeting? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to item 4, which is a study session. And I believe Manager Rebecca Lane is presenting.
While she's getting the presentation up, item 4.1 is a study session, Housing Choice Voucher Program Administrative Plan, update to administrative plan changes required by the Housing Opportunity through Modernization Act.
Thank you for your patience, commissioners. My name is Rebecca Lane, and I am the manager of the rental assistance programs for the City of Santa Rosa. And I am pleased today to join you again with a second in a series of presentations regarding the Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan, update to administrative plan changes which will be required by the Housing Opportunity through Modernization Act of 2016. So first, an overview of the purpose of the administrative plan and the voucher program. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is a primary rental assistance program under the Department of Housing and Urban Development. The Housing Choice Voucher Program is administered by public housing authorities that operate under contracts with HUD. The Santa Rosa Housing Authority is currently contracted to administer 1,925 Housing Choice Vouchers. The Code of Federal Regulations, Part 24, is where the regulations for the Housing Choice Voucher Program are found. And additional guidance appears in Public and Indian Housing Notices, or PIH notices, and discretionary policies within those regulations are determined by the local Housing Authority Board of Commissioners. And those policy decisions are outlined in the local administrative plan. As such, the administrative plan must be adopted by the Housing Authority Board of Commissioners at a public meeting, and changes to the administrative plan are often specific to a certain subject and affect only parts of the administrative plan. It is a lengthy document. It's about 600 pages, just going over all of the rules and regulations of the program. They're restated in the administrative plan, how the federal regulations that are not flexible, and it's also the document where local policies can be outlined. And an example of that is the project-based voucher program policies, emergency housing voucher policies. That's not a program that was available to every jurisdiction, so that's determined on a local level whether or not those policies need to be in the administrative plan. And then an example that you'll see later on in the meeting is information and policies and procedures related to the administration of the waiting list for the program. We do have regulation changes that are anticipated in 2024 under HOTMA, which is the Housing Opportunity Through Modernization Act. That was passed in 2016, but the implementing regulations were just released last month, September 29th. So between the last time I was here to talk about these changes and now, we did get the implementing guidance from HUD. And one of the things that also changed in that guidance was the timeline for when those changes need to go into effect. So we have much more of this information than we did last month. This slide is a little bit of a repeat of last month, just as a reminder of what we need as a housing authority in order to move forward with the HOTMA changes. So the first thing is that we were waiting on last month, but that we have now, is the implementation guidance that was issued on September 29th. We have a new data transmission form. So every family that's on the program, there is a report that's generated in our software to indicate where the family lives, what their income is, who's in the family. All of that information is transmitted to HUD on a particular electronic form. That form has been completely revised. The new one was published on October 6th. That will be the one that we are required to use once the policies all go into effect. In addition, the way that we transmit the data and where we transmit it to is changing. That is currently our financial information and our household data information are stored in two separate systems. One is called the Voucher Management System. One is called the Public and Indian Housing Information Center. And both of those are merging into one called the Housing Information Portal. That is still very much in the testing phase, so we can't transfer onto the new policies under HOTMA until we're also able to transmit the data into the new system. Excuse me, that we do have access to that system, and we will be testing as soon as it is ready for us to do so. the local software that we write and maintain here in our housing authority also will need to be updated in order to reflect the changes to the forms that I have mentioned. So there's some major IT effort going on behind this as well. The requirement to transfer to the HOTMA rules, because they are so different than the current rules, do have to go all at once. So it's an all or nothing effort, and we now know that we have to complete the transition no later than January 1st of 2025. The September 9th publication of the implementing guidelines did tell us a little bit more about the timeline. When I was here last month, the information that we knew was that we had to publish our new administrative plan before January 1st of 2024, but still without a go-live date for the HOTMA rules to go into effect. So that's changed now. We do not need to come back to you before January 1st of 2024 with the new plan. Instead, that will be closer to March or April, depending again on some information that we're still waiting for from HUD, the IT efforts that we need to make sure that we're testing and are going to be successful. So by April is when we will present the new administrative plan under the new rules, and it will be due to HUD roughly 75 days before our fiscal year start date of July 1. So yes, there it is. April 17th, 2024 is when our specific deadline to submit, to update our administrative plan. But because there are still some updates that need to happen from HUD regarding specific policies, we are still anticipating that we will be publishing an administrative plan under which we will not be fully operating. So in that document, we will have pre-HOTMA policies as well as post-HOTMA policies, and ideally be able to project in that publication by April 17th of 2024 what specific date we will transition to the new rules. But at this point, I don't know if we will be able to do that or not, because there are so many other moving parts that have yet to unfold. So in addition to the changes in addition to the policy changes under HOTMA, some examples of those are that there is going to be an asset limit implemented on the program of $50,000. Technically, under the regulations, very strictly interpreting that, what that means is that if a household has more than $50,000 in assets, then they will not be eligible for the program. However, there's a lot of caveats to that, and some of those details and exceptions to that policy are still being discussed at the federal level. So that's an example of some of the significant policy changes that are going to come under HOTMA. In addition, the HOTMA regulations are changing the inspection standards. The NSPIRE standards, that's the national standards for physical inspection of real estate, those standards are meant to join together all the different types of inspections that federally assisted housing falls under. So right now, the Housing Choice Voucher Program operates under one set of inspection standards, and public housing under another, and multifamily housing yet another. So they're joining across all the different program types one inspection standard. This won't be too different for us because we've actually been a pilot agency testing these standards in parallel to housing quality standards for about 4 years. So we're very familiar with them, and this won't be too big of a lift. It's just, again, waiting on some technical information insofar as transmitting the data to HUD. And then we'll also anticipate, as we always do, that there's some minor language revisions in the plan. So this timeline we've updated since last month, but just as a reminder, last time I was here, this first study session was just a definition and purpose overview of the administrative plan. The second study session today, we have just gone over the anticipated timeline for the implementation of HOTMA. And our next study session, which I don't yet have a date for, we will present the draft administrative plan, and we will seek direction about the discretionary policies that we do have still under the HOTMA regulations. And then at some point before April 17th of 2024, we will bring the full administrative plan with your feedback on those discretionary policies. And I am quite certain at this point that we will still need to come back after April 17th of 2024 for just additional cleanup of language and other things that might still be pending by the time of that April submission. And that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Kate. Any questions from commissioners? Go ahead.
Good. Am I on? Okay. So this sounds like they're all pretty much standardized changes. Coming down from HUD, is there any local tweaking that gets done?
Yes, there is some degree of discretion within certain policies, and we're still fleshing that out as to which ones we do have control over and which ones we don't. Often what that looks like is that HUD has passed a regulation and given choices to a local jurisdiction about how, to a degree, how you would like as a local jurisdiction to implement that particular change. But there are some things that are set in stone. The asset limit is one example where the discretionary policies associated with that might relate to how we verify a family's assets, but there's no flexibility about the asset limit itself.
Right. And the application date on this, will we have an opportunity to review these changes?
Yes. So the next study session, which at this moment, I can't say for sure what month that might be that we'll be ready to bring that. But at the next study session, that's what I plan on doing, is asking for your feedback where there is discretion, where we do have opportunity to implement something that makes sense for this jurisdiction.
Okay, yeah, because I'm interested when we get to the point of possibly expediting some of the real estate inspections, if that's a possibility. Do you see that as being something that we might be able to do locally?
By expediting, do you mean the scheduling of inspections, or?
Yeah, my experience has always been when a person is moving into a new property, that an inspection is set up. Whereas if we have a property that's been built by the city and with our funding, and we pretty much have been with it along the way, can we have like one inspection, boom, city is...
I understand. Unfortunately, no, we won't have any discretion as far as that is concerned. inspections will still be required. It's the standards to which we are inspecting that are changing. And they're largely the same. Certain items, a broken window, for example, that would fail an HQS inspection. It will also fail an Inspire inspection. It's just a matter of making the inspection standards similar across the board for all the different subsidy types.
Yeah, it just seems like a lot of time and human time and effort that goes into that whole process.
And if I can just elaborate on that for a second too, is the regulations do require or have a sunset date for inspections. So for instance, if we inspect a unit and no one moves in within 30 days, we have to re-inspect it. And that is per HUD regulations. So frequently we'll have landlords who say this unit is ready to lease. Staff will go out there, inspect the unit, and if no one's moving in within 30 days, we have to go re-inspect.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, can you define the assets? You said you have this $50,000 asset level. What is the definition for assets?
Yes, well, I can tell you as best as I know right now, which is that refers to cash in your hand, in bank accounts, 401ks, property. So any asset, the combined value will not be allowed to exceed $50,000.
Commissioner Newton?
Thank you, Rebecca. Couple questions on implementation. They pushed the date back to January of next year. Do you think that will be, because we have to transition over all at once, right? And so do you think you'll have everything you need from HUD in order to meet that January 1st deadline, even after now that it's been pushed back?
I do think that we will meet that deadline. The January 1st of 2025, or really December 31st of 2024, is the very last deadline, and that I think that HUD will stick to. They have given us more flexibility right now in how and when we'll roll out the policies, and they did that because they were hearing from so many jurisdictions that have publishing something on January 1st of 2024 that no one in September knew what it was going to look like was unrealistic. So I do think that they've already provided some flexibility on and extensions to the deadline. So I don't think that date will be pushed back any farther. I'm anticipating, I'm hoping, imagining that our transition will coincide with the beginning of our fiscal year, which would be July 1st.
Wow, okay. And so you feel like you have everything you need at this point from them to stay on
Not
that
quite
timeline?
yet, but
yeah. You're hopeful that you'll have it when
Yes.
you need it? Okay.
Yes.
The other thing I'm curious about is the IT burden. There's new database, I guess, that you guys will be inputting your information into. And HUD is developing that, but you mentioned a number of updates that need to be done in-house. Now, is that to align with this database, or is you mentioned
Exactly.
forms and things like that?
Yeah, so our software is developed in-house by our IT department, and that software takes all the information that our staff is entering about the family data and puts it into this electronic format that is submitted to HUD. And both the form that is filled out by the software system and the database where we submit that information, both of those things are changing. The new forms, the electronic forms, were just published on October 6th, but our IT department is already completely on top of it. I've been answering emails this morning about questions from them about different things. So I don't have any concerns that the amount of work that is being put on our IT department for this is going to delay it in any way. They're very efficient.
Okay. So going forward, after this sort of wave of work that needs to be done to implement it, do you anticipate it'll be the same amount of work for those folks going forward, or more, less? I mean, hopefully you'd hope that a change like this would streamline things and create less work. A lot of times, in actuality, it's not the way it works. It's more. I'm just curious what you think.
Right. The IT work, I think, I can't answer that yet because we haven't been able to access the testing site because it's not ready for housing authorities to be testing yet. The work for the staff, the eligibility workers and our frontline folks, this is not streamlined for them. This is more work for them. So that's unfortunate. And one of the ways that we are looking at the discretionary policies is what will present more administrative efficiencies so that we can save some time, because we know we're adding a lot of time in other ways.
How so for more frontline folks?
The verification procedures, the way in which we make a determination as to whether or not we will review an income change. We used to have more, we currently have more discretion over when a family reports an income change, whether or not we're going to change that portion of rent. So our current policy, when that happens, if your income has gone down, then we're going to readjust your rent because you should be paying less rent. If your income goes up, we're only going to go through the process of making a change to your rent if it's a change of greater than 20%, because on balance, it's more work to do that. That gives the family some more income in their pocket, and we won't be able to do that anymore under the new regulations. The determination as to whether or not an interim reexamination will be done is based on much more complicated factors than whether or not the income has gone up or down. So it's things like that.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, and I guess in the administrative plan, we'll see some discretionary things that hopefully make it a little easier in the implementation.
I hope so too.
Stuff out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? So I have a few questions. We used to have the waiting list on paper, and now it's all electronic. Has that been completely converted over?
So that's the subject of my next presentation, the report item. But we have both now, basically, is the answer to that. So we do have an online system, and we also still have paper applications.
And I think, Rebecca, correct me if I'm wrong, is we keep the waiting lists that we received in paper until we exhaust those waiting lists. So we are still working through the prior applicants who applied via paper. So that's why we have those still in place. The most recent waiting list, which we just completed this summer, was electronic, with the exception of individuals who requested accommodations. So if you have access issues or other limitations that would prevent you from applying electronically, then we provided an accommodation of a paper application.
Thank you. And all that data is housed with the city, or does it go up to, the wait list stays here locally?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not transmitted. I'm just kind of concerned about security with it being transmitted back and forth.
No, that's completely, the waiting list is totally in-house. That's
The people
not
that are on vouchers, that is transmitted up to HUD, and any income verifications. Now, I don't remember, are those done annually?
at minimum, they're done annually, yes.
Okay, and that's the income verifications, that's all done online now?
Yes, so the electronic systems that I mentioned that we're currently using, the PIC system and the VMS system. The PIC system is where the family data is transmitted, and one of the reasons that it is being replaced by the new system is because of information security. The new system will be more secure.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? Want to open it up for public comment? Not seeing anybody in chambers for open comment. We will do email. Any email?
There are no email public comments for this item.
Okay, so I will go ahead and close for for public comment on this one item. This is a study session, so we don't have anything to vote on. We will go ahead and go to item 4.2, which is overview of loan payments.
All right, thank you very much, Chair Owen. The next study session is an overview of loan repayments, and I will be presenting it with Nicole Del Fiorentino, who is our Housing Community Services Manager for the Housing Trust. While she gets the presentation up, we put this presentation together to respond to a commissioner question from a previous meeting, and thought it would be beneficial for all commissioners to receive the information and have the ability to ask questions as we go over it. Okay. All right. So just to give you some quick background on our loan portfolio, we currently have a value of about $182 million, and this is all of our loans put together. We track these via software that our IT department that Rebecca just spoke about created for us, and they provide regular maintenance. So it helps us monitor the sources of the loans, the term, and other compliance aspects. The majority of the loans that are approved by the Housing Authority have a 55-year term, and that's from the date that the deed of trust is recorded. So with a few exceptions, they are secured loans. They're secured against the property. They accrue simple interest, 3%. Again, there are a few one-offs where we'll have slightly different interest rates, or if a loan was funded through the state of California, there's one program that requires a 1% interest rate. But the majority of loans that are coming before you are 3% simple interest, 55-year term, and they require repayment of surplus cash. So surplus cash is determined on an annual basis. All of these loans are required to provide us with audited financial statements at the close of their year. Generally, the project loans run a calendar year, so January 1 to December 31st. So each spring we being Nicole's team, receives audited financial statements for each of the projects. The general practice is that the property owners hold these in individual limited partnerships to isolate them from other investments, and then also to protect the limited partners' interests. So the surplus cash is determined by reviewing the operating income and the operating expenses of a project. Some of the items that are deducted as operating expenses some of the things that are listed after the operating expenses are the deferred developer fees. And so you may see this as we're reviewing loans. If a project's going to take a $2 million developer fee, they may choose to leave $1 million of it back in the project and then pay themselves back as the project gets up and running. So we would see that coming out of the project once it's in service. Also, the partnership has management fees. These generally are about $25,000 to $30,000 a year, and that's for expenses associated with the partnership. Oftentimes, our loans are behind loans from the state of California, so they will take their loan repayment from surplus cash ahead of us. And then we also do see ourselves sometimes in reimbursement situations with the County of Sonoma. So we'll also see repayment of loans from the Sonoma County Community Development Commission. So this is a high-level example. It may be a little bit difficult to read on the larger screen, but hopefully it's clear to you on your individual devices. But just walking through what some of the income and expenses are for a project. So you'll see the majority of rent in this particular example is from actual unit rent. They may receive other revenue from laundry fees, or if there's other fees on the property. Those do vary by project site. Most common operating expenses are the salaries and benefits for the employees of that particular project. That could be the manager, the maintenance staff. Property utilities, so these water, trash, PG&E for common space, or depending on how they handle the individual units. Repairs and maintenance is oftentimes one of the larger expenses on the site. A property management fee, depending on the project owner, sometimes we'll see in-house management, like for instance with Burbank Housing, they have their own management arm, but there is a fee associated with that. Or other projects may hire a third-party manager for the site. General administrative expenses would be the costs associated with the office for that management, the management of those units. And then finally, insurance for that project. So you can see with the revenue, we had about almost $900,000 in operational revenue, and then we're deducting about $400,000 in operational expenses. Our loans, the Housing Authority's loans to these projects are deferred, but the majority of projects will have a first mortgage that requires regular debt service. So you'll see that coming out of the project's income. The fee associated with conducting the annual audit for the project. Then we'll have partnership management fees, and then if there's any fixed assets that they need to purchase for that particular property. So in this case, you'll see that the surplus cash that was available is a little over $12,000. And that would then be split among the various lenders who have deferred loans for the project. Are there any questions on this slide before we proceed?
Commissioner Newton?
Yeah, can you explain what it means, what deferred loans? What does a deferred loan mean?
So our loan, like our loan's deferred. There are no required payments unless there's surplus cash. But with
Okay.
a first mortgage, you have an established repayment cycle. So you have to pay monthly debt service payments. That'll be your principal and accrued interest on the loan.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Commissioner Conte?
Quick question. Are these loans ever transferable?
I'm sorry, could you speak into the microphone?
Are these loans ever transferable?
Our loan documents do provide some provisions for the transfer of a loan. It does need to be reviewed and approved by the Housing Authority. So we want to vet the organization that would be assuming the loan, make sure that they are in line with the intent and purpose of our funding.
I do have a question on here. So purchase of fixed assets, usually you'll see lenders have a requirement for replacement reserves, which means it's a reserve for replacing windows down the road or roof down the road, not necessarily for fixing a broken window or something. Are those counted as an allowable expense?
The replacement reserve or the fixed assets?
Replacement reserves.
Replacement reserves are an allowable expense. In this particular example, it wasn't showing up as a line item. But yes, we often see that, and it is required, I believe, in HCD loans require a set replacement reserve for the projects, and tax credits as well.
And when you're talking the difference between partnership expense, management, and property management fees, that would include on-site and off-site property management or owner expenses associated with the property. Is that correct?
Yes. So we'll have the on-site expenses, so the salaries and benefits for the on-site management, but then the property management probably has some back-end expenses.
Probably accounting or something.
Yeah, that you would see in the property management fee. So that's to collect all of those costs.
And then items that I've seen for these properties, sometimes the cities will defer their fees, those for building permits or connection fees. That sometimes happens for affordable projects. Are those senior to these loans?
What I've seen most common is when we have fee deferrals, those will come out at the conversion to perm, when we convert from the construction loan to the permanent loan. So oftentimes during the final cost certification.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be included in an annual audited financial statement, because this is looking at, say, year 10 of a project. So
Okay.
if there were deferred fees those would have been repaid.
Those have been taken care of by now.
And oftentimes, that's how the city structures it, is if there was a deferral of, say, park fees, it would need to be repaid when they convert to their permanent financing, so when the first mortgage comes into place.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, so thank you very much.
My microphone. Next, we want to just quickly walk through how you're seeing the loan repayments from surplus cash. So in 2022, and this would be for expenses that were income and expenses for the calendar year 2022, we received approximately $600,000 in loan repayments. And the way it breaks down is we return it to its source fund. So I'm going to go to the next slide. We attribute it all back to where it came from. So that's how, on an annual basis, when you're looking at the funds that are available to lend, the amounts will greatly exceed what our CDBG entitlement is, because every loan that had CDBG in it that provided us with surplus cash, we're going to put that portion of the principal and interest back into that fund. So you can see we have a rather big chunk for housing grants. We'll see a lot of home and CDBG, and then our local funds, which are the real property transfer tax and in lieu housing fees. So those are the most common funds that are repaid and then go back into our loan pool to relend. So this is just kind of a summary of what I just explained. And so that's how we develop the revolving loan fund. And on an annual basis, when we're looking at about a little over $2 million in federal grants and then several million in local funds that we generate, we're able to take the principal and interest from repaid loans and put that back into our revolving loan fund for upcoming NOFAs. So that was a quick summary of our loan repayments, and Nicole and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions, commissioners? Commissioner
Going
Smith?
back to the beginning on background, all loans have 3% simple interest. How did you come up with that simple interest number?
And I'd say not all loans, the majority of them. Unfortunately, I don't know off the top of my head how we arrived at 3%, but it is in line with what we see from other lenders. We didn't change it when the market, when interest rates were very low. We were still lending at 3%. Right now, it seems like a pretty good deal in the lending environment. But I don't know exactly how they arrived at 3%.
And the other would be, it's just simple interest rather than compounded interest like a normal.
Hi, thank you for the question. Yes, it is simple interest. We are in the business of making sure that these units stay affordable and not necessarily going to income production for the housing authority. So with that being our main goal, it is industry standard to keep it at simple interest rather than compound interest, so that the properties can retain a portion of their profits to put into the replacement reserves and whatnot to help keep the properties in a good working condition.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Conti?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Are they backed, government backed for any default?
So in these particular examples, we're just talking about our loans. They're secured by a deed of trust. If there's a first mortgage, oftentimes those are from lending institutions, so they would be, and Jeff, please jump in if I'm way out of my lane of knowledge, but those would they have government protections for a first mortgage, as a commercial lender?
Well, just to the extent, in general terms of any mortgage loans, who's ever in first position has first right if there's a default. And if they foreclose the loans that are junior, which these loans are junior, they're subordinated to a permanent lender's deed of trust, they would be wiped out. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the first lien, because if you looked at what we were talking about in the earlier slides for the cash flow, you'll see that debt service on the permanent loan is senior. but to the extent that the surplus cash was not being paid to the city, that would be a default on this loan, and then the deed of trust on the city's loan would take care. And I will see the city attorney shaking her head correctly, so I think I'm doing it right. So you could have a permanent lender that's fine, no default, getting paid, but that doesn't necessarily mean the junior lien, which this would be, could still go in default, because that cash flow is not being paid back under the terms of the agreement.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Any other questions? So one to carry through on this, because it's a 55-year loan, and to the extent that the end of 55 years the surplus cash was inefficient, not sufficient to pay all of it, it is forgiven at the end of 55 years. Is that correct?
So no, the loan terms are 55 years. The loan becomes due and payable at year 55 for any balance remained owing of the principal and interest that has not already been paid by the interim surplus cash payments.
And if the property is sold, the loan becomes due and payable. Is that correct?
If they don't wish to have it assumed by the new owner, then yes, it would become due and payable, but the regulatory agreement would survive any loan payoff to ensure the continued affordability for that 55-year term.
And again, as we were talking earlier in terms of seniority, the regulatory agreement is even senior to the any permanent loan. So a permanent lender has to, if they were to take it back, that regulatory agreement stays in place, but which requires the below market rate units, whatever was put in place to make it an affordable project, that would stay in place. That way, that regulatory agreement is senior to any bank loan.
Correct, and typically in practice, what we see when we get to the end of that 55-year term is that the projects are still typically owned by a nonprofit. They wish to keep them affordable. They typically look to resyndicate, in which we would then extend, we would come to the Housing Authority, but we would seek approval to extend the term of the loan along with an extended regulatory agreement to keep that affordable project for a longer term.
If I'm not mistaken, the 55-year term is new within the last 15 or 20 years, so we haven't seen any of these come to maturity. Is that correct?
Correct. That's what I was going to jump in after Nicole finished. Probably within the last 15 years, we've moved to a 55-year term. Prior to that, it was 30. And so we have seen a handful of those come forward where they have refinanced the property. The request to extend the term of the loan and then also extend the regulatory agreement has come before the Housing Authority. And it's our goal to preserve the affordability. So after we vet the finances of the project and the refinancing, our general intention is to support the extension of the loan term and regulatory agreement to make sure we keep those units affordable.
Thank you. Do any other questions from commissioners?
You mentioned that the property could be sold during this time frame. Why would a property in affordable housing be sold?
So I'd say it would most often occur in the case of a smaller nonprofit if they are no longer able to sustain their operations. When we have seen those in the past, they're looking for another nonprofit to take over the project. And if we have any ownership units, we'll see those turnover more frequently, but for like a rental project, it would be a nonprofit or a group that is no longer operating the units or has had a shift in their mission.
And the city would have to approve any kind of sale or something like that?
Yes, again, in our loan documents, we have the sale of transfer, so it would need to be a request to staff and then presented to the Housing Authority for there to be a change in ownership and then an assumption of the loan.
Just as a follow-up, my understanding is that any sale of the property would be done with the regulatory agreement in place. So you can't sell the property and then make the property a market rate unit. The regulatory agreement stays in place.
Correct.
Okay, any other questions from commissioners? Any public comment? Not seeing any public comment. We either have staff or ourselves here today. We'll small community. Any email comments?
There are no email public comments for this item.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and close public comments for this item 4.2. Thank you very much. This kind of gets into a complicated, but the nuts and bolts of how we do projects, and every time we do these study sessions, it's important for everybody to quite sort of understand how all this works. We will go ahead and move on to item 5, which is public comments. I'm not seeing anybody in chambers for public comments. Any email public comments?
There are no email public comments for this item.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and close public comments. Approval of minutes. Any commissioners have any comments on the draft minutes from September 25th? Not hearing any comments. This doesn't require a vote, so we'll just put down that they've been approved. Moving on to item 7, which is Chairman Commissioner reports, and I understand that Commissioner Newton had a question.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I was reading in the Press Democrat. I know you love those questions that start that way, but I was reading about this Bay Area Housing for All bond that's sort of in the works, and it sounds like a really good deal for affordable housing. I was just curious if your department has a role in sort of putting forward any, I don't know, wish list items or drafting requirements or anything like that, if there's any role for your department or maybe even the Housing Authority with that bond.
So the answer is yes, and we'll be returning to the Housing Authority at a later date. The Bay Area Housing Finance Authority is operated by ABAG MTC, so the Association of Bay Area Governments and the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. They are advancing a housing bond in November of 2024. As government staff, we can only provide education. We cannot provide any advocacy for voters, but we are in the process of learning more about what that means for our community. We will be developing a proposed expenditure plan to send to ABAG MTC, and that will be done with review and approval of the City Council, and we'll share that with the Housing Authority as well. We have not gotten to the City Council step yet. If the bond is to pass, Santa Rosa could receive anywhere from $120 million to about $240, and that's based on a bond size of $10 to $20 billion. So again, that will be the November 2024 ballot. Another item that needs to occur in order for that to be successful is a change to the state constitution that would reduce the voter threshold in order to pass that. Currently, it's at 2/3, and they are looking to reduce it to 55% of the voters.
So your input from your department to the governing agency, I can't remember the acronym, but will it be how that portion for Santa Rosa would be allocated?
The expenditure plan, as it is currently being contemplated, would require us to identify the various types of housing and programs that we would put the money towards. So the development of new affordable housing would be the primary interest, but there's also, I believe, options for rehabilitation, renter protection. So we would need to outline those programs and processes to administer the funds.
Thank you.
Question?
Commissioner Smith?
On this potential bond, Megan, how would they just give Santa Rosa, we'll say $120 million put into a banking account, and we would just draw down on it? Is that the way it would work?
So this is Jessica Mullen from the City Attorney's Office. No, it's okay. I just wanted to jump in. I'll let Director Bassinger respond to this particular question, but if you all would like to discuss it in more detail, it might be best to agendize it for a future meeting if we're going to get into an extended back and forth on the topic.
So Commissioner Smith, in response to your question, that has not been determined yet, is how the drawdown and if there would be several tranches of funding or one lump sum.
Commissioner Conti?
Yeah, I was just wondering if that bond could include something in terms of home ownership program?
Again, that would have to be something we contemplate. Right now, this is in its infancy. So there'll definitely be more information coming in the future, and we will put this on the agenda for further discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Following city attorney's recommendation, if we get to the point, Megan, where we think it's pushing closer because we're looking over a year from now, I would like to have it come back from staff kind of explaining the outline of what's in the legislation, even though we probably won't see legislation for this for quite a while in terms of a draft. So what do you recommend in terms of having enough information to kind of explain how this would work?
Right now, Nicole and I are participating in kind of educational meetings with ABAG MTC staff. Once we have some more information, we'll look to schedule something in the winter to present to the Housing Authority.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any committee reports? Oh, I need to open this for public comment. There's no public comment here. Any email public comments?
There are no email public comments for this item.
Thank you. I'll close for public comment on item 8. Item 8, any committee reports? Any housing authority, any questions of staff? I think we probably already covered that. Following protocol, I don't see any public comment in chambers. Any email public comments?
There are no email public comments for this item.
Thank you. Go ahead and close for item 8 and move on to item 9, which is executive director reports and communication items.
All right, so attached in your agenda packet is the monthly pipeline update, which gives you a look at how units are progressing and what the Housing Authority is looking to see start construction in the near future. A couple of noteworthy items that I want to mention this month is this Friday, and hopefully all of you have received email invitation and have been able to respond, will be the grand opening for Laurel at Perennial Park. This is the site of the former Journey's End Mobile Home Park that the Housing Authority was able to provide financial assistance as well as project-based vouchers to help develop the senior affordable units. I believe it starts at 11 a.m. on Friday, so hopefully you are able to attend. Staff is also working on the closing for Burbank Avenue Apartments, and again, a cleansing references the execution and review of all the loan documents from the various lenders. Burbank Avenue was before you last month to clean up some of the ownership structure for the project, and that will be developed by Burbank Housing, and it's 64 units on Burbank Avenue. So we're excited to see that close and start construction. Last month, we also reviewed the Down Payment Assistance Loan Program. This is known as DPAL, and that's a $2 million program that the city funded. Applications opened at the beginning of October. We've received 53 so far. They are currently being reviewed for eligibility, and the initial applicants will be notified likely this week on their eligibility for the program. So Commissioner Conti, this goes back to your question about home ownership. This is a new opportunity for residents of Santa Rosa to apply for a home ownership loan, and it would be up to $75,000 or 10% of the purchase price. It's a deferred loan, so no payments are required as long as you are living in the unit as your principal residence. And because it's an ownership unit for a single-family house condo, it's a 30-year term to match a conventional mortgage. And then finally, I just want to mention that the Housing Trust is beginning the consolidated plan process. This is a requirement of HUD that we have to do every 3 to 5 years to outline how we will be spending our CDBG, home, and HOPWA funding. So it's a rather lengthy endeavor that Trust staff is initiating and will likely be before you in the spring. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Smith?
I noticed that on the current construction, there are 7 projects that, if everything goes okay, will be completed by the end of the year. Are reports then generated, sent to the state that we have completed these projects and we get credit for them?
So on an annual basis, the city reports to this California Department of Housing and Community Development on the permits issued and then the permits completed. And that's where, yes, we report on the affordability of the units and receive credit for our regional housing needs allocation. So depending on when those are completed, and that requires the certificate of occupancy and the final inspections for the project. So some of those, in all reality, might slip a little bit, but they're first reported when the permits are issued, and then we follow up with the state on completion.
So I take it, overall, the city's looking good in building affordable housing?
It's kind of a big question. So we receive cycles, RENA cycles, and they identify the number of units that they would like to see us build in certain income categories. Our current RENA cycle is 2023 to, I believe, 2031, and requires a little over 4,600 units at various levels of affordability. I think from my perspective, we're doing pretty good, but it does take a lot of financing to meet those goals. So we don't usually meet the low income goals because, as I'm sure you've seen in some of the funding requests that come forward, we're usually putting in about $100,000 of Housing Authority resources per unit in order to assist a project. So it is difficult when we have $6 million NOFA budgets to provide enough financial assistance to advance all of those projects. And again, the projects that we're seeing on this particular pipeline list have benefited from disaster recovery funding, from an increased amount of tax credits available at the state level, again, due to the disasters in 2017. And then the state has also had more resources available for affordable housing in the last few years than they have, I'd say, in decades.
Any other questions from commissioners?
Yeah, for the down payment program, I forget how, so there are 53 applicants. I forget how many we thought we would be able to service with that program. Do you remember what that was?
Yeah, so we have $2 million available. We are estimating to help about 25 households. We'll see, it depends on the purchase price because it's $75,000 or 10% of the purchase price. So that's where we can get some variation. And hopefully we'll be able to assist more than 25.
Yeah. When do we think those payments will go out? When will that process finish up and those down payment assistant payments go out?
So what happens is once buyers are determined to be eligible, they are notified and they have 6 months to search for a home and get into contract. That can be extended if they're making diligent efforts to get into contract. So I'd say in the next few months, hopefully we'll start to see the first loans closing. And then those loans will stay in place for the term of ownership for that particular household or 30 years.
Thanks.
Any other questions from commissioners? I do have a question. The estimated completion date for what's under contract, how often is this reviewed?
I'm sorry, do you mean for the projects that are under construction?
Yeah, so I'm looking, for example, that we've got the top one for took place, 1115 projects. It's not uncommon to have them slip in terms of their schedule. So where is that? How often are these updated? Is that something that was looked at when the initial funding was put in place for the estimated completion, or is that column updated every month? It's updated monthly, and staff is reaching out to the various developers to check on the timelines. Perfect. Thank you so much. Open for public comment. Again, seeing no one in chambers, I will now ask for any email comments.
There are no emailed public comments for this item.
Okay, thank you. We'll close this item for public comments. We will move on to item 10, for consent items. I don't believe we have any consent items. We do not, so no public comment on that item. Item 11, which is a report item for an update to the Housing Choice Voucher Program Administrative Plan, Chapter 4. And we will open it up for Rebecca Lane for a presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, commissioners. Again, my name is Rebecca Lane. I'm the manager of the rental assistance programs for the City of Santa Rosa. And I am here this afternoon to present an update to Chapter 4 of the Housing Choice Voucher Program Administrative Plan, which covers the application, waiting list, and tenant selection policies. The Housing Choice Voucher Administrative Plan, as you have heard in a previous study session in this meeting, as well as other study sessions and items, is the primary policy document for the Housing Choice Voucher Program. There are primarily in the administrative plan the federal regulations outlined within that document, as well as certain agency-specific procedures and policies where there is discretion at the local level to make certain decisions. Revisions to the administrative plan are reviewed and adopted through a public meeting process. And as I mentioned, today's review is of Chapter 4 of the administrative plan, which covers the application, waiting list, and tenant selection procedures. The reason that we're bringing this item is today is basically to clean up language that is in the current version of the document. We didn't want to wait until the full administrative plan since that got pushed back into possibly April. So this one was important to just take care of primarily, as you'll hear, so that we can continue to accept referrals for one of our limited preferences. So the first item that we'll cover is the procedures for our waiting list. So earlier this afternoon, we had a question regarding the wait list, and the waiting list procedures are not going to be affected by HOTMA at all. The waiting list policies that we have in place here at the City of Santa Rosa have been in place for as long as I've been here, and that is that we set our determination as to how you get on the waiting list and at what rank you're placed on the waiting list. That's done randomly. That's done by lottery. So that part is not changing. We have just merged onto an online system for households to apply to the wait list. So we previously have had paper applications. Those paper applications go out to the community and are returned through the post office, and that all of those individual pieces of paper are entered into our system. There's a lot of reasons that is more, administratively burdensome, both for the staff certainly, but also for households to be able to access and apply. So we had been working on an electronic waitlist process prior to the pandemic, but that occurrence really kicked that effort into high gear because we also had emergency funding available, and we wanted to be able to get that to the community. At that point in 2020, there was no office that was open, and so we launched for that particular funding source the online application process, and since 2020 have now fully merged over to the applications being primarily done online. We do still have paper applications for households and individuals who are not able to or choose not to use the electronic process. That's completely fine, and we will continue to communicate on paper with those households. And an important question came up earlier that I'll specify here. This merger of the wait list from paper to online application system did not throw out the old waiting list. We still have everyone who has been on the wait list. They just had an opportunity to create an online account for themselves. Most people did. It makes it a lot easier. You can update your contact information and those sorts of things. You can also apply for additional opportunities for project-based voucher units, for example, if those units are aligned with what your housing needs are. We also are able to communicate general affordable housing information through the electronic system, such as last month with the DPAL program rolling out, we communicated to everyone on the wait list that opportunity was available. So the electronic system has really just enhanced our ability to communicate with the households who are in need of assistance. And we still have the paper system available for households who need it. We also wanted to just explain in the administrative plan document that this is now available, and explain in that document how people access the online system. So that's what has been provided in Chapter 4 with regard to the waiting list procedures. And again, there's not any policy change here. The applications are still selected by lottery, and that has not changed. It's just the way to access the wait list. The other item that we're presenting to clean up in the language is related to the limited preferences that we have on our wait list. So currently we have 1 general and 2 limited preferences on the wait list. The difference between a general and a limited preference is that a general preference applies to the entire waiting list, the entire existing wait list, and may, if households qualify for it, move them up to the top of the list. The 1 general preference that we have is if we had to terminate a family from the program because of a lack of funding, that general preference was established during sequestration, which was the only time in recent memory that actual threat to the funding for this program was out there, and because of what was going on at the federal level in terms of budget cuts. So we established that preference back then, and HUD has encouraged us to maintain it, not because they anticipate that will ever happen, that we would have to cut families from the program because of funding issues, but it's something that is good to have in place in case of any funding emergency. And the limited preferences are ones that determine a specific percentage or number of vouchers of our turnover per year that are set aside for a specific population or a specific local need. And that requires that you partner with an agency that is working to contact those households that would qualify for the preference. So our limited preference are the 2 that we have. One was established in 2018 for disaster survivors, folks who lost their housing as a result of the 2017 wildfires. So in this item, this recommendation is to eliminate that language from the administrative plan, because we have fully utilized those vouchers, and the partner agency, which was Rebuilding Our Community, the ROC, that agency has disbanded after this number of years. So because that limited preference doesn't particularly apply anymore, then our recommendation is to remove it from the administrative plan. And the second language revision is for a still active limited preference, one that households who qualify can be referred under, and that is for people experiencing homelessness. And what we need to do here is just change the language to clarify that now referrals for that preference should come directly from the coordinated entry system. When we established this limited preference in 2017, the systems were not the same as they are now. Our partner is still the Sonoma County Continuum of Care, but at that time, the referrals were coming directly from all the different agencies who participate in the Sonoma County Continuum of Care, and now the COC has established a coordinated entry system whereby all referrals for all housing opportunities for people experiencing homelessness come through. So we'll participate with that effort by offering these vouchers. We're very familiar with that referral system and process because that's how all of the emergency housing vouchers have been referred. So the recommendation is that by resolution, the Housing Authority adopt revisions to the Housing Choice Voucher Program Administrative Plan Chapter 4, Application, Waiting List, and Tenant Selection Policies to update the procedures to apply for the Housing Choice Voucher Program waiting list, eliminate the limited preference for households affected by the 2017 wildfire disaster, and update the referral mechanism for the limited preference for people experiencing homelessness. And I am happy to take questions. Thank you.
Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Smith?
Yeah, I just had one. What do we do here to find new landlords to take Section 8 tenants? Is there a program, an outreach program to convince landlords to take them on? It sounds like a lot of them are reluctant, so I was just curious what the city does to find more. I mean, you can have all these vouchers, but if you can't use them, they don't help.
Yes, we have participated in a number of outreach efforts and education efforts for the community for a number of years. It's really one of their consistent efforts. Our most recent partnerships have been not only with nonprofit agencies, but with the other housing authority here in our area, the Sonoma County Housing Authority. So we've done a lot of joint education efforts. We'll go to meetings of real estate professionals to present items and information about our program. One of the ways that we partner with nonprofits is by, if those agencies have funding available for other types of housing support, such as case management or security deposit assistance, we'll partner with those agencies to continue educating the community, because there are more dollars now in the community for other types of rental assistance, not just the Housing Choice Voucher. So we've been able to work with the agencies that have that type of funding as a more general education effort. The other thing that that is now a factor is that the state has a source of income discrimination law, which means that solely on the basis of having a voucher or having another form of rental assistance, that can't be a reason for a rental application to be turned down. So the Northern California Fair Housing Advocates, as well as Legal Aid and California Rural Legal Assistance, have done a lot of education around that, and we've partnered with them on that effort as well.
So have we been successful to add new landlords to the program?
Yes, I don't have that data in front of me right now, but we have seen new landlords, particularly with the emergency housing vouchers, come online, and part of that is because there was additional funding under that program specifically for landlord incentives.
Any other questions, commissioners? Commissioner Conte, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering, with the date that a person gets on the wait list and then the lottery, how does that lottery system work?
So we typically open the waiting list for 1 month every other year. And during that 1 month, we receive, most recently, we received 7,400 applications. It was a month and a half, actually, the last opening. And we selected at random 5,000 households from that 7,400. And so not only were the applications that would be added to the list selected at random, their rank was also determined at random. So everyone who applied in 2023 has been added to the bottom of the waiting list, because the other piece of our waiting list is that it's just by time of application. So they've been added to the bottom of the waiting list below people who applied in previous years. And if you are first in the group who applied in 2023, or you are last in the group of people who applied in 2023, that number was also determined at random. So it's a combination of when you apply and the lottery system, which we've determined is the most equitable way to distribute the resource.
But of course, those people who applied in 2021 or earlier get priority.
Yes, so the people who are currently at the top of the waiting list applied in 2016. So they've been waiting, and they are coming to the top of the list in the order that their ranking, which was determined at random, applies.
Why is the wait list open then? What reason for that if you've already got so many people waiting?
That's a good question, and there are housing authorities that do it differently. We have determined that we want to be able to communicate with people, especially now as we have more project-based voucher units. Those might be specific to certain households. So for example, at Crossings on Aston, we have 6 units, small number of units, but they're all 3-bedroom units, so those are great for large families. And if you are currently on our waiting list and you have a large family, you can see that is available to you, and you can apply for that, and you might get that assistance faster than you would the tenant-based voucher. So because we have other opportunities that we want to communicate to people, and because we want to offer some degree of hope that even if it's a long wait, we want to be able to stay in touch with people during the duration that they're on the list and offer them any other sorts of opportunities that come along during that time.
And how are the people contacted? I guess there's going to be a few people who have already found housing who would be bumped from the list. People aren't necessarily going to, update whether they're still looking or not.
Right. Thank you for that question. I mentioned that we open the list typically every other year, and in the intervening year, the year in between, we are updating the wait list. So we send out a communication to everyone who's on the list to say, are you still interested? Do you think you're still eligible based on your household income? And please confirm that affirmatively. So if you have a paper application, if that's the way you've chosen, then we'll send you a form and you have to send that form back. And if you have opted for the electronic system, then that will all be through email and through the household logging into their account. So we do check back in frequently as well to make sure that people can opt out if they don't want to be on the list anymore, or if they have moved out of the area. There's a lot of reasons why people might not stay on the list, and that doesn't reorder anything. That just might put more room between one rank and the next one. If 5 households in between rank number 1 and rank number 6 have fallen out, then rank number 7 is going to be the next person. So we do that with the same amount of frequency as we do opening the list to try and keep all the information fresh.
And on average in a year, how many people are taken on to the program, Section 8 program?
That depends on how much we are spending in assistance for the households that are already on the program. So we're constantly balancing between the number of vouchers that we have in our contract with HUD and the amount of dollars that we're spending on providing assistance to the households who are already actively receiving assistance. So as our portions of rent go up, either because of our payment standards increasing because the rents are increasing or because households are losing income, then it might result in fewer families coming off the wait list because the vouchers that we have available is also connected to how much funding we have available.
So there's not like averages over the last few years, not counting maybe during the fires or something?
Right, yes, the last few years have been, there's been something unusual in each one of them, but off the top of my head, we did call a lot of people from the wait list this year, this calendar year. Not a lot of households followed through with the applications. So that's another piece, is that once you do get to the top of the wait list, whether or not at that moment you're ready or need it, that can affect how many households we're serving. I don't want to inaccurately answer that question, so I can come back with that information about how many households have come to the top and how many ultimately did receive assistance this year.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Newton?
So what's the overall number on the waiting list now if it goes back to 2016? How many people are on there, roughly?
About 7,000 right now.
So I just want to have something confirmed because I had somebody ask me in the community, well, I wouldn't qualify for this because I'm a one person and I'm not a household. So a household can be one person.
Absolutely, yes. Household refers to a head of household and that and any other members of that household, and we can serve single member households as well as families of multiple people.
Can I ask our next meeting and the meeting following, as we talk about this, if you could put something together that basically shows this is the amount of vouchers we have, this is what the dollar amount is, and kind of show I know we're going to have an aberration during the fires and COVID, but this is what our average voucher dollar amount has been, so people can kind of get them an idea, and to balance that off. This is all data I know that you have, that one bedroom, and the way it works is there's a 1 bedroom fair market rent, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. So if we look at that, this is kind of how I think it's just good for the commission to see. Here's 1 to 3 bedrooms. I don't know if studios maybe. And say this is the number of vouchers we have, and this is kind of the average that goes toward that. Is that data that you can be put together?
Absolutely. It's
so
also
it would by bedroom size and show this is the fair market rent. This is what the voucher is, which means the balance, which is 30% of their income, is what the rent payment is. Is that correct analysis on how it stratifies?
So the household pays 30% of their income, not 30% of the rent.
Right.
So the data that we'll have is the average housing assistance payment. We can break that down internally by bedroom size, but HUD tracks it at just an average level across the entire program, and that information looking back and current, is available actually on HUD's website. So it is publicly available, but I'm happy to also put together a presentation to explain that to the commission and point out where that information is publicly available, and also drill down a little farther into our data.
Yeah, and again, if it's more cumbersome to do it by bedroom size, just, I wanted to see kind of a trend in terms of this is where the rents are going, because fair market rent versus if you were to look for an apartment are not always the same number.
Right.
And to look at what the fair market rent would be, this is what the voucher is on average, as it was in the last few years, and this is therefore the tenant would be paying their 30%, and that's 30% of gross income, not net income. That's correct?
Correct.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? We don't have any public comment. Any email comments?
There are no email public comments for this item.
Okay, thank you. Close public comment. We do have a resolution to vote on. Wanted to see if any commissioners would make a motion for the resolution.
I make a motion to back the resolution.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Can we go to a vote, please?
Okay, give me one moment. Okay, we'll do a roll call vote for this resolution. We will start with Commissioner Smith, then Commissioner Conte,
Aye.
Commissioner Newton,
Aye.
and Chair Owen.
Aye.
Okay, that motion passes with 4 ayes, with Commissioners Downey and Friedman and Vice Chair LaPena absent.
Thank you very much. And as always, I want to thank staff for, again, another wonderful presentation and putting together all this information. I know it can be quite complicated. And we'll move to adjourn today's meeting. Thank you.